There. Hi there. Jessica here. And I thought I would record myself doing a mock version of session one of CBT for insomnia, just to give you an idea of what that might look like. So, if you decide to do CBT for insomnia with me, or let's just say you reach out because you're having trouble sleeping and you're not exactly sure what kind of help you need, our first session is going to be an intake. I'll ask you a bunch of questions about your sleep. I will assess for and officially diagnose insomnia, but I'm also going to screen for other things like sleep apnea, circadian rhythm disorders, all that kind of other stuff. So let's say we've done our first session, our intake, and I'm decided, yes, this is definitely insomnia, which honestly most of the time that's what it is. And this is session one. So what I like to do is a lot of education about sleep and about insomnia. So I have this handout that I put together, and I pull it up and we go through it in the session. And then I also send it to people after we're done. So normally this, takes a little bit longer than it will on this video because we're pausing for questions. We're pausing to talk about how it pertains to you specifically. But I think you'll still get a lot of good information out of this. So let's go. So you want to think about sleep and wakefulness as being processes that compete with one another. So only one can win out at any given time. And you want the right one to win out at the right time. If you have a sleep disorder, the wrong one is winning out at the wrong time. So in the case of insomnia, you are awake when you want to be asleep. Some other sleep disorders, you're asleep when you want to be awake. So we need to get the right, you want to be asleep when you want to be asleep, awake when you want to be awake. So there are two biological processes that have an impact on what your sleep looks like. Formally, we call them process S and process C. Process S, you will typically hear me and other people refer to this as your sleep drive. So your sleep drive determines how much sleep you get and what the quality of that sleep is. So sometimes the issue is that you don't have enough sleep drive. And we'll talk about here in a minute what builds it, what detracts from it. There's also process C. So you might think of this if you've ever heard of your circadian rhythm or your circadian clock or your body clock. This is a roughly 24-hour biological rhythm that every cell in your body has a circadian rhythm. Every living thing on the planet that we know of has a circadian rhythm. It does a bunch of stuff, but one of the things it does is it determines the timing of when you're asleep and when you're awake. So if you've ever traveled and you find that you're sleepy at weird times, awake at weird times, hungry at weird times, that's your circadian clock trying to catch up to your new time zone. Both of these processes work together. Sometimes, in the case of insomnia, one or both of them has gotten messed up in some way. So, if you want really good sleep, like we don't just want sleep, right? We want deep and quality sleep. What you need to do is be building that drive for deep and quality sleep throughout the day. So, generally speaking, the longer and more active you can make your day, the better you're going to sleep at night. So you need to be building it throughout the day. Sleep drive is completely unrelated to what time it is. The circadian rhythm is a little bit more related to the clock time in a way. Sleep drive doesn't care. Sleep drive, is there enough sleep drive built up in the system or is there not? If there's not, you're not getting to sleep, you're not staying asleep. So it's only related to how much is built up in the system. You can think about sleep drive in a couple of different ways. One way is to think about it kind of like you're filling a balloon throughout the day. And then once you go to sleep, you're going to let the balloon go and the balloon's going to deflate. The balloon needs to be full enough so that it can deflate and carry you through the whole night. You can also think of it like saving for retirement. It's really best to kind of start early and make frequent, regular contributions to your retirement account. Like you're not going to magically, have the money just because you get to 65 and you're like, okay, I'm ready to retire. I'm tired of working. If you haven't been saving the money, it's not going to magically appear just because you need it. Sleep drive is the same way. If you haven't been building it throughout the day, it's not going to be there when you need it at night. So this is why going to bed earlier typically doesn't get you any more sleep. And that's a common thing for people with insomnia is they think, oh, I need to cast a big wide net. I slept like crap last night. Let me go to bed earlier. That'll get me more sleep. Well, if the sleep drive's not there, it's not happening. Your sleep drive is also called your sleep homeostatic system. Sleep is homeostatic, so meaning if you get too much of it, then you're going to, it's kind of like eating. It likes to keep a set level. Let's see, how can I explain this? If you've just eaten, you don't want to eat anymore. But if you haven't eaten in a long time, you're pretty hungry. That's kind of how sleep works. Like if you get 10 hours of sleep, then you're probably not going to get a lot of sleep the next night because your body's like, oh, you got a lot of sleep last night. We don't need a lot of sleep tonight. But if you are sleep deprived for a long time, that tends to rev up the sleep homeostat and get you more sleep. Now, there's some nuance there because if you have insomnia, I'm sure you're sitting here thinking, I'm not getting enough sleep. Why isn't my sleep drive kicking into high gear? So we'll kind of talk about like why that is and what's going on. But your sleep drive or your sleep homeostatic system or your sleep load is another thing we call it. That gets you to sleep, carries you through part of the night, and then it passes the baton to your circadian system. Sometime during the middle of the night, the circadian system carries you through the rest of the night. So we kind of have to think about getting it there to the rally point or the relay point. And then your circadian system, think of this like your body's sense of a day. So the word circadian comes from the Latin for it, circa dies, which means about a day. Like I mentioned earlier, you really notice your circadian rhythm when you travel, particularly if you've traveled across a lot of time zones. And really, if you travel, for most people, traveling east is harder than traveling west. Because when you're traveling east, you lose time and you can really only shift your circadian rhythm about an hour a day. So if you're flying somewhere with an 8 hour time difference, it's going to take you a few days to really adjust to that. So you notice it when you travel. But your circadian rhythm also gets reset by just big swings in regular activities. You don't have to travel. But if the timing of when you're going to bed, when you're waking up, when you're eating meals, light exposure, if the timing of that stuff is really erratic, then you honestly might as well be flying coast to coast every single day because your circadian rhythm gets confused and it doesn't know, is it day? Is it night? Should I be awake? Should I be asleep? I don't know what's going on. I'm just going to make a judgment call. And then again, you're sleepy at weird times, you're awake at weird times, and it's just not working. Or you can think of a kid that misses their regular nap, right? They're used to taking a nap at a certain time every day. It gets to that time. Their circadian rhythm is telling them it's time to go to sleep, but the world is saying, no, it's time to be awake. And, as meltdowns tend to ensue there. So here is a diagram of what these two processes look like working together. So this is process S. This is your sleep drive. When you first wake up in the morning, it's pretty low because you've just burned it off over the course of the night. It builds throughout the day. So you kind of see like the longer you're awake, the more sleep drive builds up. Most people actually find that if they go to bed a little bit later, they fall asleep faster and they actually sleep a little better because they have more sleep drive. It's like one of the biggest things that I change with people with insomnia is go to bed later, especially if it's taken you forever to fall asleep. If it's taken you a really long time to fall asleep, you're either going to bed before you have enough sleep drive, or maybe you're going to bed too early for your circadian rhythm. And or it could also be that anxiety is coming in and screwing it all up. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But it builds throughout the day. There's things that you can do to build more of it. And then once you fall asleep, it starts to burn off. That's the thing that gets you to sleep and keeps you asleep. Burns off, burns off, burns off. And then you're awake the next morning. The whole process starts over again. There's your circadian alerting signal. The circadian rhythm does a lot of stuff. One of the things it does is tells you when to be awake. So that's what this is talking about, the alerting signal. So again, it's, not super high when you're first waking up in the morning, but it builds throughout the day. You have a dip in the afternoon. Everybody does. We have a particular time, sometime in the afternoon, that you feel a little more tired, a little more sluggish, a little bit low energy. Typically, it's 7 to 9 hours after the time you woke up. It's temporary. You come out of it, then you sort of get like a second wind. So typically, people are kind of at their most alert um, as the day turns into the evening. Yours might be different. Your circadian rhythm might look a little bit different. But there's a particular time in the evening where your brain starts to secrete melatonin. So, melatonin is a hormone, we all have it, and it's related to the basically when it's starting to get dark outside. Your brain is like, oh, it's starting to get dark outside. Okay, so my human will need to be falling asleep. I should start secreting some melatonin. So we call it your dim light melatonin onset. Typically, people are going to fall asleep 2-ish hours from the time that that starts. So some people's dim light melatonin onset is not going to be at 9 p.m. It might be later. Um, but whatever time that is, you're typically going to fall asleep a couple hours after that. So again, it drops off throughout the night or as the evening wears on. So here's where you're starting to fall asleep. Of course, at some point, it's completely off because you're asleep. Your body temperature, we call this your temperature minimum. Your body temperature hits its lowest point in a 24-hour period sometime overnight. It's different for different people. For the average adult, it's 4 a.m. Yours might be earlier, yours might be later. But your temperature minimum, your body temperature will then start to rise again. And then you will wake up 2 to 3 hours after that temperature minimum. So, people who have a really hard time waking up early, teens, young adults, their dim light melatonin onset is later than the average person. It really does skew later. And their temperature minimum is later. If your temperature minimum is 4 a.m., then you can wake up at 7. But if your temperature minimum is not till 7 a.m., which could be the case with teens, young adults, people with circadian rhythm disorders, then you're going to have a really hard time waking up before like 9 or 10 in the morning. And then this again starts over and goes through a 24-hour period. Typically, this is the point where I'll pause and ask if people have questions, if everything makes sense, because I've just thrown a lot of information at you. But let's keep going. So then I like to talk about there's something called your sleep architecture, which is just what your sleep looks like over the course of a night. There are 4 stages of sleep. They're called N1, N2, N3, and REM. N means non-REM because we divide it into REM and non-REM, and then we divide non-REM into 3 stages. Some people say there are 4 stages. You might stumble across something that says N4. I'm just going to use N3. This is what I was taught. I think this is easier. But the N4 people aren't necessarily wrong. N1, lightest stage of sleep. When you first fall asleep, this is where you are. Typically not for very long. You're very easy to wake up in N1. Weird stuff can happen in N1. You can have like hallucinations where you think you hear someone calling your name or you think you hear a noise. Generally speaking, it's not something to be too concerned about. Although, if that is happening for you, if it's happening regularly, that would be something that you and I would talk about and we could decide, is this a problem? Do we need to do something? Or you can have what's called a hypnic jerk, which is where all of a sudden you're just like, and like your leg kicks or something moves. And again, generally speaking, not a huge deal, but can be really concerning if you don't know what's going on. Lightest stage of sleep, easy to wake up. If you are not woken up, you're going to move into N2, little bit deeper stage of sleep, further slowing down of everything. This is actually where you spend the bulk of your night. So N1 is typically 2 to 5% of your night. N2, 45 to 55% of your night. So most of your night is going to be spent in N2. N3, this is deep sleep. This is what, when people talk about deep sleep, they're talking about N3. This is really only 10 to 20% of your total sleep time. Like, you don't want, like, just sometimes people have this idea that all their sleep needs to be deep sleep. But this is what would be considered kind of normal and healthy, is 10 to 20%. And then REM stands for rapid eye movement. This is where most of your dreaming happens. REM is a light stage of sleep. You're very easy to wake up when you're in REM, and REM should be like 20 to 25% of your total sleep time. So this is just showing, this is one person. This is going to look a little different, kind of depending on how old you are. Your sleep changes over your lifespan. But you fall asleep and you go to N1, N2. You do most of your deep sleep in the first half of the night, and you do most of your REM sleep in the second half of the night. N3, you are dead to the world. So people who sleepwalk, it's usually kids that sleepwalk. You see it in adults, but it's not as common. Most people age out of it. But kids who sleepwalk, kids who have sleep terrors, those are happening in N3. They don't know what's going on. They are dead asleep. They're impossible to wake up. If you've ever tried to wake them up, it's very hard. And they typically don't remember it. They don't remember that they woke up last night screaming bloody murder, or that they like stumbled into the kitchen, and they typically don't remember that. There are interventions for sleepwalking and sleep terrors. So again, if that's something that you have specific questions about, that is something we could talk about in a specific session. And then REM sleep is, again, where most of your dreaming happens. This is if you're having nightmares, those are happening during REM sleep. So people tend to remember nightmares. You wake up, nightmares tend to wake you up, and people become alert pretty quickly and figure out, oh my God, that was just a dream. And they tend to remember their nightmares very well. But there's just a little, I don't know, factoid distinguishing nightmares from night terrors. We have really good treatments for nightmares. It's pretty simple. It only takes a few sessions. It almost sounds like, oh my God, there's no way this should work, but it does. So if nightmares are a problem for you, then we do have a really good, like, 6 session treatment for nightmares. All right, so that's kind of everything I like to talk about in terms of just sleep, the biology of sleep, what that looks like. Um, Let me just making sure this thing is still recording. All right, so then I like to move into talking about, this is called the behavioral model of insomnia. So now we talked about sleep. So now we're going to talk about, this is assuming that we've done an intake, that I've said, yes, this is insomnia. Insomnia is one of many different kinds of sleep disorders. You can also have more than one sleep disorder. Like, for example, you can have insomnia and sleep apnea. Um, Even if you have sleep apnea, I can still treat your insomnia, even if you're not using a CPAP, even if you're not using the CPAP as much as they're telling you you should use your CPAP. Um, we can still treat your insomnia. So I want to put that in. There used to be this idea that you had to treat sleep apnea before you treat insomnia. New research has shown that actually you can go ahead and treat the insomnia. Sometimes even the sleep apnea gets a teeny tiny little percent better. I mean, not 100% because there's a different treatment for it. But I don't want, like, untreated sleep apnea does not have to be a barrier to getting your insomnia treated. So this is the behavioral model of insomnia. There are 3 sets of factors that will contribute to a person developing insomnia. So you think of insomnia as a learned behavior that's become a habit. So we're changing a habit. So you have predisposing. These are the things about you that just made you prone to developing insomnia. They didn't give you insomnia, they just pushed you a little closer to the threshold. Then typically there's one or more of what we call precipitating factors. So this is the thing, or maybe multiple things that got you to a point where it's like, oh, now I'm not sleeping. Um, I'm going through a divorce. I just lost my job. I just had a baby. I retired. I moved. I got a promotion. I got married. Typically, it's some life transition. And life transitions will disrupt almost anybody's sleep. Like lots of people are going to have some temporary sleep problems while they're going through a stressful life event, even a quote unquote good stressor. But then for many of those people, the sleep is going to self correct. It's going to get back to where it was, and there's no problem. Those aren't the people that come see me. The people that come see me are the people that are in this perpetuating section. So these are the people that maybe the stressors, okay, I'm settled in my new job. The divorce is final. The baby's sleeping through the night, whatever it is. Now their focus has shifted from I can't sleep because of this thing to I just can't sleep. It's not the thing anymore. I just can't sleep. It takes on a life of its own. This is chronic insomnia. It's no longer tied to any stressor, it's no longer tied to any external thing. You just can't sleep. And it just keeps going and go. It perpetuates. So these are the people that CBT-I was designed to treat. So let's look at some examples of these three sets of factors. Predisposing. So people who tend to be more on the anxious side. I mean, it kind of makes sense if you're just hyper aware of what's going on, you're conscientious, you tend to worry about the future. Um, these are also the people that tend to end up in insomnia land. Also, just people that are more preoccupied with their health or their well being or their daytime functioning. Those people seem to be more prone to developing insomnia. Anybody with a trauma history, and I'll just really briefly define trauma as exposure to actual or threatened death, exposure to actual or threatened bodily injury, or sexual violence. So, lots of different definitions of trauma out there. That's the one that I use. So, anyone with a history of any of those type of events. And I also wanted to say with the trauma, it doesn't have to have happened to you directly. You could have witnessed it happening to somebody else, or you could have learned about it happening to a loved one. And then finally, family history of insomnia. There might be some genetic component. It's not the biggest component, but there's a lot of the time when I ask people, they'll say, "Yeah, my mom never slept well, or my grandfather never slept well," or a lot of the time there's some family history. So this is the stuff that just makes you prone. Doesn't give you insomnia, but pushes you closer to the threshold. Then you have these precipitating factors. Now, I have some people who have just never been good sleepers. They've been anxious their whole life. They've never been good sleepers. And then I have other people who were good sleepers until something pushed them over the threshold. And like I said earlier, it can be any major life change, even a positive one. It could be getting married, it could be having a baby, it could be getting promoted, it could be retiring, something that you would think would be a positive life. I mean, it is a positive life change, but it could be a precipitating factor for insomnia. And then other precipitating factors are mood disorders like depression, bipolar disorder, anxiety disorders like generalized anxiety, phobias. What are other social anxiety disorder? Restless leg syndrome, which is something that I screen everybody for. Some people have already gotten it diagnosed and treated, but if you've never had it, or if you've never, it sounds, people make fun of it, and it's awful. Like it's actually just really awful. It's like you can't keep your legs still. Chronic pain. Oh my gosh, chronic pain and insomnia are like the original vicious cycle. Because if you have chronic pain, you're not going to want to get out of bed. You're not going to want to be active. You're not going to want to do all the stuff that builds sleep drive. Chronic GI issues, so gastrointestinal, indigestion, acid reflux, stuff like that. This really kind of goes along with people who are anxious. You know how they call your gut your second brain, and you want to know and something interesting too. Your gut has a circadian rhythm, so you may notice that when you travel, Your schedule of using the restroom gets screwed up because your gut, every cell in your body has a circadian rhythm, including your gut. So this is why that tends to get messed up when people travel. Injury, of course, is a precipitating factor because, you roll over onto your arm and it hurts and it wakes you up. And then finally, breathing difficulties like sleep apnea or maybe asthma. So these are all the things that can push you into insomnia. Some people just have acute insomnia. They have some insomnia for a little while and then it goes away and things get better and it kind of works itself out. And like I said, those aren't the people who come see me. The people who come see me are the people who are getting into what we call the perpetuating factors. So these are the paths to chronic insomnia. There are three paths, and you might have relate to one, you might relate to two, or you might relate to all three. They are all paths to the same place. So, what are the three explanations for why somebody has insomnia? So, the first one is what we call homeostat. There's a disruption to the sleep drive or the sleep homeostat. So, there's not enough sleep drive. These are all the factors that weaken sleep drive. This is the big one. Excessive time in bed relative to sleeping. Well, how do you know it's excessive? So, there's actually a way that I can calculate it. Everyone who works with me keeps a sleep diary where you track what time you go to bed, what time you got out of bed, what time you fell asleep, how many times you woke up. So, I'm able to calculate your total time in bed and your total sleep time. We want the total sleep time to be about 85%, like between 85 and 90% of the time you're spending in bed. If it's less than 85, that is considered excessive time in bed relative to sleeping. This is a huge one. People come in and they think it's the caffeine and the screens, and they're like, I'll quit drinking coffee, I'll put my phone up. And I'm like, no, spend less time in bed. Like, I'll look at your sleep log and determine if not that I don't make that recommendation for everybody. Not everybody needs it. But honestly, this is one of the big ones. And then there's another thing we'll talk about that's another one of the big ones. Napping spends, it's just like spending money. I mean, do you have it to spend? Do you have it in the budget? Is spending money good or bad? I don't know. It depends. Do you have money in your checking account or are you bouncing checks? I'm showing my age there. Are you overdrafting your account? Um, Naps are not inherently bad. We'll talk about again if you work with me. We'll talk about there's good naps and there's bad naps, and I have guidance around naps. But naps will spend your sleep drive. So if you don't have it in the bank, you might not want to be spending it. Substances, so caffeine, nicotine, alcohol, do have an impact on your sleep. Um, but this tends to not be the biggest culprit unless somebody is doing it like right at bedtime. Like if somebody is smoking like right before they go to bed, if they're drinking alcohol to fall asleep, if they're having a lot of caffeine really late, we can look at that. But this usually is honestly not the biggest culprit. Decreased physical activity. The more active you are during the day, the um, the more sleep drive you're going to have, the more sleep drive you're going to bring with you into the night. But honestly, this one and this one are usually the two biggest things we tackle here. Lingering in bed more than 30 minutes after you wake up. What's going on is people are trying to fall back asleep. They're trying to get more sleep. They wake up and they're like, dang it, I slept like crap last night. I'm so frustrated. I can't live like this. I need more sleep. And so they just lay there, um, trying to get back. And they usually don't. It usually means they're just laying in bed forever. And then finally they're like, okay, I guess I have to get up. And they get up. This will start to kill your sleep drive. Which we'll go more into again. If you start working with me, we'll really get into like the nuts and bolts of like if this is session one. Session two is where I start really explaining the nuts and bolts of this. So then I split out for people out or outlined what specific tools are going to address each thing. So if you have a lot of issues here, this is the stuff that's going to address it. So stimulus control, that is the official name of the intervention. It's very ominous sounding. It's either ominous or sexual. I'm not sure which, maybe both. It kind of, I don't know, it sounds worse than it is. Basically, what we're trying to do is the stimulus in this case is like your bed, your bedroom, bedtime. And then we're just trying to control the response to the stimulus. So, in other words, we want it to be consistent and predictable that you get into bed and you go to sleep. And that's it. And that's all that happens. We don't want it to be, well, I get into bed, maybe I sleep, or maybe I just sit there and worry for 3 hours. Who knows what's going to happen? Stimulus control gets it to where it's like, I go to bed, I sleep. And then I go to bed the next night and I sleep. And then I sleep. And then I sleep. And that's it. Increasing sleep efficiency. So this is only if you're spending like excessive time in bed. There is an intervention because we noticed that sleep efficiency, because one of the things we track on the sleep log is also the quality of your sleep and how refreshed you felt. That tends to correlate with sleep efficiency. I'll point out to people that when their sleep efficiency is between 85 and 90, that tends to be when they say their sleep was good and they felt refreshed when they wake up. So it's not just a number, it's a number that really does translate into people feeling happy with their sleep. And then sleep hygiene. So sleep typically session four. It's not the first thing I get into. Sleep hygiene is you've tried this. I can almost I don't e- I, you know I don't know who if you're watching this. I may not have even met you, but you've tried this. You have tried sleep hygiene. Um, this is the stuff like make your bedroom dark and quiet and cut caffeine and limit screens, do some deep breathing. You've tried all this stuff. This is always the first stuff people try, and it's fine. It's not that it's bad, but it's insufficient if you have insomnia. So I was told to think of sleep hygiene as preventive care, like brushing and flossing. It's good to brush and floss. Everybody needs to brush and floss. But if you have insomnia, it's like having a cavity. You're not going to brush and floss your way out of a cavity. You need to go get the cavity treated, probably drill out the disease part, put a filling in. Then your dentist will probably say, please continue to brush and floss to prevent future cavities. So we're going to do this stuff first because we got to fix that cavity. Then I will go over brushing and flossing for sleep. This is really good preventive care to try to keep insomnia from coming back. Sometimes the issue is circadian disruption. So sometimes it's scheduling. So, what are the issues here? If somebody has an hour or more variability in the time they're getting out of bed or the time they're going to bed, really it's the rise time that's more critical for that to be consistent. We say an hour because daylight saving time is an hour, and we know that has an impact on people. So we really don't want that variation to be more than an hour. It doesn't have to be like to the minute, the same time every day. Try to keep it within an hour. If it's swinging all over the place, it's really no different than you're flying coast to coast every day, or you're flying back and forth from the US to Europe, or you're flying somewhere else with a huge time difference and you're never giving your body time to adjust. And then you end up again, you're sleeping at weird times, you're awake at weird times, you're hungry at weird times. It's jet lag. You get jet lag and you haven't like gotten to go on a trip. You haven't even gotten a fun vacation out of it. You're just getting the crappy part and not the fun part. Or a night owl keeping an early bird schedule or reverse. I don't see as much of the reverse, but I tell you what, I see a lot of people who they're night owls. And you know what? It's okay to be a night owl. Some people are night owls. Some people do not get sleepy till midnight, 1 a.m. And it's really hard for them to wake up early. We have this belief in our society that it is good or proper or whatever, healthy to go to bed early and get up early. We just have this idea that that's what people are supposed to do. And so I see a lot of people that honestly, their problem is they're just going to bed too early because they're not an early person. They don't fall asleep at 9 p.m. So I have people where I'm like, okay, well, let's just have you go to bed when you actually feel sleepy. Maybe that's midnight, but they get into bed at midnight, they fall asleep in 10 minutes and they sleep through the night, which is way better than going to bed at 9 and laying there for 2 hours or doing what we call surfing, where you're just in and out of sleep and in and out of sleep. So sometimes that's the problem is that people just aren't listening to their bodies because we have this idea and that message is out there. that night owls are bad, that they're irresponsible or unhealthy. Typically, I don't see it the other way around, like an early bird trying to keep a night owl's schedule. Although it can happen if you're an early bird trying to keep a night owl's schedule. I mean, maybe it tends to hurt your social. Being an early bird tends to hurt your social life. Being a night owl tends to impact you like professionally at work, at school, stuff like that. So this is where I will start trying to make the distinction between insomnia and a circadian rhythm disorder. Because circadian rhythm disorders look like insomnia. Like you're going to come in, most people don't come in saying, I need help for my circadian rhythm disorder. Most people come in and they say, I can't fall asleep at night, or I wake up way too early in the morning. So my job is to try to figure out, is it insomnia? Is it a circadian rhythm disorder? If it is a circadian rhythm disorder, I do know how to treat that. It's a little bit different treatment. The stimulus control that I mentioned will help stabilize the circadian rhythm. But circadian rhythm disorders have a little bit different treatment. CBT for insomnia is not the treatment, but there is a treatment for those, and I do know what it is. So if it does end up being that, ooh, actually, this looks like more of a circadian rhythm disorder, that is something I do know how to treat. So finally, we have what are called the arousal factors. It's so fun. Everything in this, it either sounds ominous or sexual. But when I say arousal here, what I mean is just like being alert, being anxious, being on high alert. I have some people where all their stuff is in here, or most of their stuff is in here. So you've got your sleep drive, you've got your circadian rhythm, right? They're working together. Arousal is the thing that comes in and just screws it all up, like throws a wrench into everything. So this is stuff like the way you think about sleep is what cognitive factors mean, or just poor sleep habits. There's something called conditioned arousal that, again, sounds sexual. It's not. This is that thing where you feel sleepy somewhere other than your bed. And so you think, cool, I'm going to get into bed. I'm going to go to sleep. It's going to be great. Well, you get into bed and then a switch flips and now you're wide awake. And you're like, really? I was tired 15 minutes ago. What is going on? And we call it the switch. What's happened is that your brain has developed this habit of being alert in bed. Or maybe there's so much stress and so much performance anxiety about sleeping that now you're alert when you want to be asleep. It's a habit. We can decondition that habit. It just takes a little bit of time. But your high alert, your arousal system or your like high alert system has the capacity to override your sleep promoting system, which is great in an emergency. House catches fire in the middle of the night, the smoke detectors go off, they wake you up. You've got this thing that kicks in that temporarily overrides your sleep drive and gets you out of your house and to safety. It's great. We all need that. The problem is that this alarm system is really overactive in a lot of people, particularly people with anxiety disorders, people with post traumatic stress disorder, and other types of people. Honestly, this system tends to be overactive in high achievers. Um, because if you think about like what does it take to be successful? It's like you want to be alert to things, you want to be on top. I mean, there's like a little bit of anxiety that'll make you successful, and too much anxiety will work against you. So what does it look like if somebody has a lot of issues here? So you know how I said earlier that excessive time in bed relative to sleeping is one of two major issues? The other one is sleep effort. Honestly, if somebody was like, I only have 5 minutes, fix my sleep in 5 minutes, without knowing anything about them, I would say you're probably spending too much time in bed. Spend less time in bed and quit trying to sleep. Sleep effort. Trying to sleep. It's trying to sleep. I ask every single one of my insomnia people if they have a spouse, partner, someone they share their bed with. I always like, how does your husband sleep? How does your wife sleep? How does your boyfriend, girl, whoever you share your bed, how do they sleep? And inevitably, they're like a baby, like perfect, like amazing. It's the law. I don't know what it is. People with insomnia and good sleepers, they find each other, they get married, they end up together. Because I tell you, every single person that I see who is in a relationship that is their situation. Or maybe if you're not in a relationship, just ask the people you know who are good sleepers. And what do they're like, oh, I don't know, I just sleep. Like I don't really like I don't do anything. And that's exactly it. They don't do sleep effort. You're doing sleep. I mean, I don't know if you are, but if you have insomnia, you're probably doing sleep effort. Try and like how to sleep. Meditation can be sleep effort. Relaxation can be sleep effort. Laying in bed trying to sleep, that's sleep effort. This is huge. I mean, I can spend a whole session, maybe two sessions going into sleep effort. And I do for people that I feel like that's a major part of it. And it is for most people. We gotta relax. You gotta quit trying. Like you gotta quit trying to sleep because trying to sleep is gonna push sleep away. Because if you want to fall asleep, you have to disengage. You have to disengage, you have to forget, you have to kind of drop out. Well, if you can't do that and exert effort. If you're exerting effort, you're engaging, you're not dropping it, you're focused, you're paying attention. You can't do that and fall asleep. Or worry about sleep. You look at the clock and you start making calculations about how much sleep I'm getting and how much is okay and how much is not okay. Or you worry about the consequences. What if I fall asleep driving my car to work tomorrow? What if I make a fatal error and I get fired? What if I don't know, forget to pick up my kid? Or people start worrying about the fallout, which then creates sleep effort because it's like, oh my God, I can't fall asleep in the car. That would be terrible. That would be horrible. It is imperative that I get sleep effort, or worry about other stuff while in bed. Sometimes people just worry about sleep. Sometimes people also will worry about their health, their finances, their kids, their family, like whatever it is. And we kind of want the bed to just be for sleep. This is conditioned arousal. So wide awake upon getting into bed. This is that switch. Sometimes this happens when you first, like at the start of the night. I also have people that it happens middle of the night. They wake up in the middle of the night because they have to pee. They get up to pee, go back to bed, and once they get back into bed, like this pattern is gotten where they start worrying about work, or they start worrying about, or maybe it takes them a little longer than usual to fall back asleep, and they start worrying about that. Staying in bed when awake. This is actually one of the worst things that you can do. I mean, we really try to get it to where essentially if you're not sleeping, you're not in bed. So a lot of CBT-I is like cutting back time in bed. Which when, if we're working together, I really get into like the data and the science and how that works. And then finally, feeling distressed when you're awake. I mean, it's one thing to be awake. It's a whole other thing to be awake and be pissed off about it. Then that turns into sleep effort. That turns into like, damn it, I'm awake again. This is so frustrating. Um, well, now your brain is going to start pairing being upset with being in bed, and it's hard to fall asleep if you're upset. So, as far as what CBTI tools address this, again, our old friend, stimulus control. I like to do this. So, if this is session one, stimulus control is what we do in session two. This one is just really great all the way around. It's one of the biggest needle movers. It's why I like to do it first. And so, that will it kind of addresses all of this. It gets the sleep drive going, it gets the circadian rhythm stabilized, and it starts to tackle these anxiety factors or arousal factors. And then I have a lesson or a session that I put together that I call thinking like a good sleeper, that really gets at all this other stuff. Sometimes this says session five, but sometimes I'll move it up. Like if we're not beholden. This is like the schedule that I set out, but we're not beholden to this. I'll move stuff around if I think that, like, not everybody needs increasing sleep efficiency. And for some people, getting into the thinking like a good sleeper, getting into these pieces is more critical. So I'll move stuff around depending on what seems to be most relevant. And then here's where I just go on, like the asterisk here about conditioned arousal. This is where I talk a little bit more about it. Um, yeah, and then here's of course I do, I assign some homework. You're keeping a sleep log the whole time you're with me. It's kind of like my X-ray. It allows me to look and see what's going on. And then I like for people to really start thinking about what are your predisposing, precipitating, and perpetuating? What are your specific factors? How did you get here? So this is a little bit about what session one of CBTI with me typically looks like. We kind of just talk through this handout and I email it to people and we kind of go from there. So anyway, I hope this was helpful. I hope this was interesting. Just thought it'd be cool to give people a preview of kind of what to expect. So if as you were watching this, you're thinking, oh, wow, this sounds really good. This sounds really helpful. Then several different ways you can get in touch with me. You can email me at it's Jessica Fink at Jessica Fink Therapy. So JESSICA, F like Frank, INK, and then at jessicafinktherapy.com. Um, you can call me at 512-522-7291, or you can go to my website, which is jessicafinktherapy.com, fill out my contact form. Whichever way you contact me, I will get back with you about scheduling a free 15-minute phone consultation. We'll talk a little bit about what's going on. I have a more or less a process for the consultation calls. And then we'll schedule your first appointment if everything sounds good. So anyway, yeah, I think I'll stop the video here, but hope this was useful. And if this really spoke to you, reach out to me because CBTI is really effective and it's typically 6 to 8 sessions and people are a lot happier and they're sleeping a lot better and it just really doesn't take a lot of time. All right, have a good day.